Hello, Leadership 201, and welcome to our second video lecture in our online classroom series. Today, we're going to talk about authentic leadership, chapter 9 in your Northhouse textbook. And I wanted to preface with the fact that many of you may have left with a lot of questions after reading that chapter, and that's okay. Authentic leadership is not really a cut and dry concept compared to a lot of the ones we've already talked about. So today, I just want to give you kind of a mile high overview of what authentic leadership is and provide you with a couple tools around authentic leadership and hopefully enough for you to be able to write a good discussion post for us and also have a good understanding and appreciation for what goes into authentic leadership. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so authentic leadership. Today we're really going to first talk about the description and kind of how it's defined. We're going to talk about approaches to authentic leadership, and I like to say there's four of them, four main ones we're going to talk about. Your book kind of divides it up into both a practical and a theoretical standpoint, and we're also going to talk a little bit about how it works and some of the criticisms and strengths behind authentic leadership itself. But first, I think it's important to just really define and describe what authentic leadership is looking for. So, authentic leadership focuses on whether leadership is really genuine or not. Um, Authentic leadership is a really new uh, appreciation. I mean, new in kind of the early 2000s, because really, for the first time, we started to see a lot of turbulence in the political kind of climate in a lot of different countries and cultures, and also at the corporate level too, in some big organizations. So, authentic leadership kind of came to fruition because people really had a desire to understand, is the leadership that I'm receiving, is the process that I'm a part of, truly authentic. And people are really longing for trustworthy leaders. They want to go to work for a company and be led by somebody that has their best interests in mind, is very authentic in the exchanges that they create with them. So, kind of to piggyback off of our previous lecture on transformational leadership, we first started to dabble into some of the ideas authentic leadership presents, but really didn't take too much time to talk about them just because it really wasn't parsed out too well in the early formation of transformational leadership when we talk about things charismatic leadership and other things among that and transformational. So really there was this need for evidence-based research of the construct of authentic leadership. So with that really comes these four major types and four very different discussions of authentic leadership. So we have an intrapersonal, an interpersonal, and then we have more of a practical, and we have what we call developmental definition. And the developmental definition is really what your textbook places a lot of focus on, and what I'll spend probably the most time talking about today. So the first definition was created by Shamir and a colleague back in 2005. And really, the intrapersonal definition relied on this idea of self-concept and how self-concept relates to people's actions. So if we jump back to our early discussions in class on positionality and social location, and kind of all of those things that make you who you are as both an individual and as a leader, this is not too far off from that either. Shamir really says that authentic leadership really relies on the life story of the leader and those critical life events that have occurred to ultimately make that leader who they are today. Um, and Shamir's work really identifies these three major constructs or three major characteristics of authentic leadership. And the first is, authentic leaders exhibit genuine leadership. So, they are really intentional about their leadership process. They are who they are. They're being reactive to the environment, to their everything that's going on, and they're just really being themselves. They're not trying to copy anybody else. Their leadership is kind of from their gut and what they feel is right, and not so much what else is kind of being told to them or being forced upon them. Authentic leaders really lead from conviction in the sense that, they have a fire in the belly to, be a great leader. And they really have a great high level of self-confidence in their abilities to lead. So an authentic leader really doesn't question what they're doing. They just kind of go out there and make it happen because they are so dedicated to the leadership process and being a good leader. that it comes natural to them. So authentic leaders also, like I said a little bit ago, are originals. They're not copies by any means. They are truly genuine in the sense that they're not having other people be formative of their leadership abilities, capabilities, or the process. So really this all comes from within, what they feel is morally right, what they feel like their value systems that they possess have afforded their abilities to then become a leader. Now, the next definition, kind of the parallel, we get into interpersonal definition of leadership. And Eagly, back in 2005, right around the same time as intrapersonal leadership, authentic leadership, basically said that leadership is created by leaders and followers together. So, as we know, leadership is a reciprocal process. And really, authentic leadership, according to Eagly, is created because leaders affect their followers and followers affect their leaders. So, the things and the actions that the followers take and the ways that the leader first interacts with the followers constantly is changing the way that the leader adapts their leadership style, and to be an authentic leader. So, in the same light, they are a very authentic person, but they really have this high relationship drive in understanding how they can best adapt themselves and how they can best assess the situation and continuously improve their leadership abilities and capabilities through the lens of their followers, which is very important. So, those two definitions are kind of in one little bubble. And now I want to move on to the developmental definition, and this is the one that I personally feel like your textbook does a really good job at explaining. And the developmental definition was created by Aviolio and Gardner back in 2005. So as you can see, all of this is right in the exact same time span of authentic leadership. And you can probably think of some of the political events that were occurring in 2005. Like the Iraqi war, other things around that time that maybe had some pretty heavy impact on our need to look at authentic leaders. And so basically, Aviolo and Gardner said that leadership can be nurtured and developed over time. So leadership, again, kind of like that intrapersonal where we talk about major life events, you know, authentic leadership can be triggered by what you do, what you experience. And leader behavior is really grounded in the positive psychological qualities and the strong ethical and moral compasses that you possess as an individual. So, from that, Aviolio and Gardner really developed four authentic leadership components. The first one being self-awareness. So, understanding as a leader, knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, your own values, and the ethical systems that you hold is very important in being authentic. Another one is an internalized moral perspective. So kind of really similar, being in touch with your morals and understanding, how your morals affect your decisions and being really convicted in those morals is important. Also, balanced processing. So taking kind of everything in and forming your own opinions, your own leadership style from what is around you. So being really adaptive to your surroundings, taking in that context as we talk about a lot in like the LFC methods that we've discussed is very important. And the last is relational transparency. So with your followers, being very open, being very authentic in the sense that, we're not going to hide things. We're going to be very open. If something doesn't work, we're going to talk about it. We're going to fix it. Me as a leader, I'm going to adapt the best way possible to make sure everybody is getting, their fair shake in the situation. So those are really the four key components that Aviolo and Gardner have identified, and we're going to talk some more. We're going to circle back around to the developmental definition here in just a second. But I want to take some time to talk about the fourth approach, which is a practical approach to authentic leadership. So a gentleman by the name of Bill George, and you probably have heard of Bill George if you've taken, into a business class or just even like to read or listen to some podcast. Bill George is a pretty esteemed author in the business world and talks a lot about leadership in that context. But in 2003, then again in 2007, Bill George talks about what he calls his leader characteristic model and kind of being your authentic self as leader. You may have heard a lot of things about True North as well, which we will also cover, and it's another great plug for our 401 class where we talk too about True North as well. You know, Basically Bill George said is that leaders have a genuine desire to serve others. And in the light of authentic leadership, and a lot of his work stems around the business and corporate world, he said that there's 5 characteristics that every authentic leader should possess. So the first one is understanding your purpose. So why am I put on this earth? Basically, why am I put into the role that I am? And what can I do and who can I impact through the roles that I have? The next and really important is a strong value system. So what is my value system? What is, you know, what values do I hold? And, you know, how can I use those values to, you know, create the best impact for my leader? Next one too is trusting relationships. So taking those key crucial relationships that we have as leaders and with our followers, and using those relationships to keep yourself honest as leaders and followers. So, you know, really important with leadership and those relationships is making sure that your followers are kind of at the forefront of everything that you do. Another thing too is self-discipline. So maintaining a key self-discipline is very important. So a good leader that's authentic is very self-disciplined, constantly wanting to improve and constantly being in touch with their leadership and leadership process. And the last one is act from the heart. So mission. So we talk a lot about, um, you know, leader needs to be in touch with all of everything that's going on around them in that context. And the act from the heart part, you know, making sure that you know your mission, know why you're purposefully there, but know the goals that you want to achieve and how you're going to get there is also very important in authentic leadership. So this is kind of the model that Bill George places in his one of his works, and I actually also attached a video to our eCampus page to talk a little bit more about this. But basically, the 5 1s: so purpose, value, relationship, self-discipline, and heart. And then it shows on the next level kind of what that creates. So, for example, relationships create connectedness, self-discipline creates consistency, heart, compassion, purpose, passion, and values behavior. So you can see how all of this goes into making that key authentic leader and the outcomes that it has with the followers and the entire contextual relationship. So let's kind of circle back around now and go more into that developmental approach, really the theoretical approaches, as we could call it, about authentic leadership. And you know, some of the more recent research that we see right now is something called the Leadership Summit publications in 2005, and we talk a lot about, you know, social upheaval and the desire for leadership to serve the common good. So, you know, really, how are we using our leadership abilities to create the best possible, you know, work for our leaders? And we also need to really explore the meaning of authentic leadership to create that critical theoretical framework. So what are we doing to really create the best possible, you know, opportunities and to really understand what authentic leadership is? And it's constantly important to continually to redefine the construct of authentic leadership and, you know, work on that. So let's kind of jump into now what the true definition of authentic leadership is, and kind of something that is discussed in your textbook, and what we really like to work on. So this is the essence is of, you know, a pattern that draws upon what, you know, promotes in both a positive psychological capacity and a positive ethical climate to foster great self-awareness and internalized moral perspective, balanced processing information, and a relational transparency on the part of leaders working with followers, fostering positive self-development. And Walumba and his colleagues in 2008 really, this may seem like a lot of information to kind of absorb, but really at the end of the day, this is just a summation of a lot of the things we've already talked about when it comes to authentic leadership. So really, at the essence of all of this in the work of Walumba, we kind of take down a couple of notes here. So the first is these positive psychological capacities. So the work of Walumba really says that, you know, things like confidence, hope, optimism, resilience, really important on the resilience, are things that really have an impact on being an authentic leader. But another one is really important is these moral reasoning capacities. So your ability to decide what is right and wrong, having that good moral compass to promote justice and work for the greater good of the organization or the community that you're serving. So really, those are two of the key factors. The next one is the one I kind of talked about earlier, is critical life events. So thinking back to our lectures on positionality and social location and all of that, you know, critical life events can be both positive or negative in the way that they form your leadership journey. So they act really as a catalyst for change, whether positive or negative, and really have an impact on your ability to be a leader. You know, and how you lead. So people, you know, really attach the insights that they have to their life experiences and draw from those life experiences to make future decisions as a precedent, really. So when people tell their life stories and are open and honest and very clear about where they come from, they gain clarity truly about their true authentic self, their true north, as we talk about it sometimes. And really this helps to stimulate overall personal growth. So into that developmental aspect of leadership, it's very important that we understand that it's a constant process, and all these life events that are occurring through basically through birth all the way up to the end of your life have a true impact on how you lead and how you constantly are changing the way that you lead. So definitely something to keep in mind. The next one, so this is kind of a way to really bring the entire basic model that was talked about in more of this developmental approach together. So there's four key components, and the first one is self-awareness. So really being able to reflect on your own core values, your identities, your emotions, your motives, and being aware and trusting of your own feelings is very important. So having that good internal compass, being very confident in that, and the next one is really internalizing your moral perspective. So additionally, having that good moral compass, um, and being able to regulate using your own morals. So knowing where you stand on issues, knowing where you stand with your morals and ethics, and then applying them into your actual leadership practice. The next one, like we were saying, is balanced processing. So your ability to analyze information objectively and then explore other people's opinions before making a decision. So having that really good relationship, having that really good tight group around you to help be supportive of you developing your authentic self as a leader, and then using that next step, which we call relational transparency, to be open and honest, be authentic when we're presenting one's true self to others. So being genuine. When something's not working, we take the time to fix it. We're very open about mistakes and failures, and then we also are very open about how we're going to move forward to make that different the next time. So I hope that kind of gave you a good overview of some of the four major tenets I say surrounding the work on authentic leadership. Like I said, I know it's a very murky subject sometimes, but let's talk about some of the strengths, the criticisms, and ultimately the application of authentic leadership. So first, how does it really work? So authentic leadership, like I was saying, is a really complex developmental process in the sense that it happens throughout the lifespan of a leader and can change. The practical approaches are very prescriptive. So we talked a lot at the beginning of our class about prescriptive and descriptive types of leadership theories. And basically, Bill George is the forefather of these practical approaches when he says that there's really these five characteristics that leaders need to be authentic. But whereas we have these theoretical approaches, this more developmental approaches, they focus more on these four key attributes. And these attributes are developed over a lifetime, often through very critical life events that are occurring. And really, the essence of this is that the impact on the followers receive from authentic leadership is that, with a good authentic leader, employees and followers should be thriving, have trust in their leader, be very optimistic about the engagements that they have with their leader, and ultimately be really satisfied with their leader. So authentic leadership is very positive in most lights. So some of the strengths of authentic leadership really is that we have this need in society to understand and have trustworthy leadership. This kind of helps fill a void. So when we talk about authentic and have a good authentic leader, this fills a major void in a very uncertain world and some of the trials and tribulations that we face. Really, this provides a very broad set of guidelines for those who want to become an authentic leader and be their authentic self in both a practical and theoretical approach that provide a map. So like transformational and also what we're going to talk about here in a couple of videos about servant leadership, authentic leadership has a very explicit moral dimension and very focused on that collective good. So using our morals, using our value systems for the greater good is important. And unlike traits that only some people exhibit, everybody can learn to be more authentic because it's all about bringing in what's in your true self. Everybody has the potential to be authentic. It's just if you capitalize on that or not. And then ultimately, this is great because it can be measured using the established instrument, which we call the ALQ, or the Authentic Leadership Questionnaire. Some of the criticisms surrounding this, authentic leadership is still very formative. It's very new. It's a young theory that has less than basically 20 years of work around it. As we know from a lot of our older theories, that's very untrue. And the moral component of authentic leadership is not fully explained, and it's unclear really how higher values such as justice inform authentic leadership. So a lot of the work around social justice is, really helpful to do that, and also the rationale for including positive psychological capacities as a part of authentic leadership has not been clearly explained by researchers. So really, there's this need for new research to go out there and see how psychological capacities have impact on them. And also really, one thing that's very important is how do the millennials react to that? So The link between authentic leadership and a positive organizational outcome is unclear. It's also very unclear whether if authentic leadership is a sufficient form of leadership on its own to achieve the organizational goals, or is it better to tie authentic leadership with something else to maybe make a better theory to ultimately fulfill the needs of the organization and have a very positive leadership outcome. People have the really capacity to become authentic leaders. It's easy. It's a lifelong learning process as well. A lot of times HR departments may be able to foster authentic leadership behaviors in employees um, and those who move into leadership positions. And it's great because leaders really always want to try to do the right thing, to be honest with themselves and work for that common good. It's a great thing. It feels good. I think what every really leader strives to do, especially in an organizational context. And everybody has these critical life events that shape them to who they are. So it's very relatable, very manageable to grow and have greater authenticity as leaders. So that really was my lecture on authentic leadership. I hope that kind of gave you some insight into the topic. And if you have any questions, as always, let me know. Hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.